Hello, and welcome to Reawaken the Dream, a course for the writer mom or anyone who has to write in small fragments of time because you can't sit down and write for a long stretch. You just don't have the time to do it. We are all about giving you some very practical tools. This part of the course, the character profile tool, which will give you the power of living characters. We are on lesson 22, our 17th character trait. So if you're just tuning in, you might want to start with lesson 1. We have a fantastic lesson for us today. So let's get started with a quick review of the last lesson. In our last lesson, we talked about the character trait of patience, and we said it belonged to the resilience group. And we said patience is a rather strange one because it's about enduring difficulties and situations of the present moment when there's really not too much else you can do except be patient, because the lost side is to have a useless outburst or to give way to anger. And we said our animal model was the caged lion. So the victory state was to suffer through with gracefully. And the end result comes out of it that we're much, much stronger. Well, today we have an interesting trait that belongs to the balance group, meekness. Now, when we say meekness, we're not talking about a cowering wallflower here. We're talking about meekness being a calm, a serene disposition while looking out towards others and seeing what others may need. An outward focus coupled with serenity. That isn't the way society uses the term meekness usually. So let's listen up in the scenarios to see if you can sense the difference between meekness as it is used by society and meekness, the character trait. Lisa wasn't much of a party gal. And having arrived, she really wasn't sure why she had said yes to the invitation. She was standing around the buffet table, kind of standing near the punch bowl and kind of looking around the room and not really sure, what she should do or who she should go to, when all of a sudden this really good-looking man came up to her and said, "Excuse me," with a big smile on his face. Lisa looked up at him expectantly. "Yes?" The man looked a little confused and backed away and said, "Can I get some punch?" Lisa realized she was blocking the punch bowl. Oh! She scooted to the side, and then very quickly, as soon as she could, she just kind of drifted over to the side of the room and just felt horrible. Oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing, she thought. She steeled herself and looked around the room to see where she might fit in, but gosh, everybody was so sleek and sophisticated looking. Oh, she just didn't measure up. She was sure of it. And why did she wear this fluffy skirt? She was really feeling horrible. Meekness, the lost state. Martha wasn't much of one for parties, but her friend Sarah had asked her to come, and so she said yes to the RSVP, and then, wouldn't you know, Sarah got sick, and at least Martha had already said she was going, so she showed up. She looked around the room and kind of realized that this group wasn't too much her crowd. But nevertheless, she looked around the room to see if she could find someone else who maybe was, didn't have someone to talk to, maybe someone who looked uncomfortable and might need someone to chat with. She saw this scene at the punch bowl, and her heart kind of broke for the woman in the fluffy skirt. She saw her drift over to the side and thought, ah, that's the person I can connect with. So Martha went over to her and said, "Hi, kind of tough crowd tonight, huh?" Lisa's face brightened. "Yeah, oh yeah, my name's Lisa." "I'm Martha." Meekness, the victory state. Beverly wasn't too happy when she pulled into the hotel parking lot next to Bruce's car. She'd arrived a half an hour early just to make sure she got there before Bruce. Oh well. She opened the trunk, grabbed as many of the decorations as she could hold in one trip, and went into the hall that her company had rented for the awards banquet, the annual awards banquet. She walked in and set her stuff down on the sign-in table, and it was worse than she thought. There was Bruce up on the stage giving orders to rearrange things. The speaker's table had been moved to one side, and they were carrying in another table onto the stage. "Bruce, get over here." "What is going on?" "Oh, I could see you needed some help. I'm just rearranging the stage. It just didn't seem to me to make much sense to put it." Bruce, we went over this in the committee meeting. Do you remember? We set the plan for the stage. "Well, yeah, but I didn't really get a chance to really totally express myself." Well, about this point in time, Ted shows up looking a little bit sheepish and said, "Beverly, I hate to interrupt to tell you this, but Mr. Phillips isn't going to be able to be here tonight. So I was wondering, do we really want to have 3 people at the speaker's table and 6 honorees in chairs behind the podium? It's not going to look very balanced." Beverly took a sigh, noticed that Bruce took advantage of the scene to go back to start ordering people around the stage. She took a deep breath and told Ted, "Okay, Ted, what would you recommend?" And Ted recommended the podium in the center and all of the chairs arranged in a semicircle behind the podium. "Fine," Beverly told him. "Ted, okay, why don't you arrange that?" Then she went up to Bruce and said, "Bruce, if you want to be a part of this, Ted is your guy. Take your orders from Ted." Bruce wasn't hearing any of it. He flew into a rage. He called Beverly a not so nice name. And then he said, "I am going to sit in the audience tonight and I'm going to laugh my head off at your stupid stage arrangement." And with that, he stormed out of the hall. Meekness, the lost state. Leanne drove into the hotel parking lot and parked her car right next to Beverly's. She opened the trunk and gathered up the garland she had made for the speaker's table. She walked into the room with her garland happily in hand and kind of froze on the spot. Beverly was up on stage talking to Ted. Bruce was nowhere in sight, and they were carrying the table, the speaker's table. They were carrying it off the stage. "Where's my garland going to go?" she wondered. So she went up to Beverly and said, "Beverly, there's no speaker table." "If you want to know about the arrangements, talk to Ted." But where's my garland going to go?" "What garland?" The garland I made for the speaker's table." "Did anyone ask you to make a garland for the speaker's table?" "Well, no, but I thought it would look really nice." "Well, do you want to be a part of this or don't you? If you want to be a part, go talk to Ted. Otherwise, just get out of here." Leanne was dumbfounded. She took her garland back to the car, put it in the trunk, sat down in the driver's seat, and just had a good cry. What? That wasn't like Beverly. She'd never in her whole life seen Beverly act like that. She was crushed. Then she thought about it some more. She thought about why she'd signed up for the committee. Last year she got her 5-year pin, and she knew how happy she'd been to be honored at the awards banquet. So she'd signed up to try to make a wonderful event for the people being honored. So she asked herself Beverly's question, do I want to be a part of this or not? She decided she did want to be a part of it. She dried her eyes, got out of the car, went back in the hall, sought Ted out and said, "Hi, Ted, I'm here to help. What do you want me to do?" Ted brightened. He's got a great big smile on his face. "Oh, I'm so glad you came back. How about that garland of yours? I think it would be the perfect thing for the sign-in table." Meekness, the victory state. Now for the analysis. Meekness is a rather interesting trait. We're going to find very, very soon that it's a balance trait. It's not a resilience trait, although going through what Leanne had to go through kind of looked like it might need some resilience, some courage, but it's not. It's a balance trait. It's not an empathy trait, even though we're looking out for the needs of others with an outward focus. It's a balance trait. So let's see how the two sides of loss are, because the nature of a balanced struggle is that there are two opportunities to fail, one on the side of chaos and the other on the side of rigidity. Our model for an outward focus thinking of the needs of others is the mother animal nurturing her young. But let's look at the loss state, the dual loss state that typifies a balance trait. On the chaos side, the loss state is losing your temper. In fact, we even say losing the temper. Very good for a loss state, right? So that's how we saw Bruce respond. Bruce did not respond with a victory state of meekness. He responded with the loss state. He lost his temper. The other side of loss is the rigidity side. And this is rather interesting because this is a case where the character folds inward on himself and no longer can look out to the needs of others. The eyes are all inward in self-analysis, self-evaluation. So let's take a look then at what the victory side means. On the victory side, we have peace. We have remaining calm, even in a situation that can ruffle your feathers. We're free from self-inward focus. That means we don't have to endure constant self-doubt, constant self-evaluation, constant self-judgment. All of that goes away. But how? There's no amount of internal analysis that can bring about an end to internal analysis. The only way that you can get away from that internal analysis is to change the focus outward to look at the needs of others. So that is the victory state of serenity, of meekness. And the prize is serenity. It's achieved through a focus on others. And it's an interesting character trait in that when you do have this serenity and you do have this outward focus, you're protected from an awful lot of uncomfortable self-conversation. It frees a lot of that up. And so in a way, who would have thought it, but meekness can actually almost seem like a superpower. Balance traits are rather interesting in their modifiers. They're the most complex of all the groups are the character traits in the balance group. We have several different modifiers going on. All of the character traits have scale. What is at stake? And when you think about it, Bruce had a lot at stake there because he's going to have to go back to work with these people, and they're all going to know how easily he flew off the handle and how he had tried to take over things that kind of rule over the decisions of the whole committee. So that was a fairly uncomfortable amount of scale. But it's always the events of the story that determine the scale for meekness. Agency has to do with our character's ability to control his own behavior. To what extent is our character able to choose his own response? Bruce flew off the handle, but Leanne got it together and said, I don't know what happened in there. I don't know why Beverly treated me that way, but by golly, I do want to help. And so she had agency where Bruce did not have agency. Likewise with Lisa, she couldn't get over the fact that she looked at the other people at the party and said, oh, they're all sleek and sophisticated and good looking, and there's me with my fluffy skirt and I don't measure up. That's a pretty uncomfortable state to go through. She didn't have the agency to be able to lift herself out of herself. Whereas we saw Martha look around the room, saw the same people and said, that's not really my crowd. Do you see the difference in the response? She didn't say, oh, they're all better than I am. No, she just said, that's not the people that I normally choose myself to be with. So she had agency, whereas Lisa didn't. And then she was able to go help Lisa. A really big one that always shows up in balance traits is limiting self-belief because it governs so much of agency. If you start out with limiting self-beliefs like, I can't control my temper, then it's damaging to your agency. So that's how these things influence one another. They're always interactive. But everyone struggles with limiting self-beliefs. And a lot of people struggle with the concept of weighing and measuring themselves against others all the time. So if you write a story where you show your character overcoming limiting self-beliefs that are impeding his agency in overcoming the lost state of meekness, you are going to have a popular character. You're going to have a story that people really, really, really want to read. Overwhelm can also be can limit your character's ability to act appropriately. We saw that with Beverly. Beverly was overwhelmed by Bruce's response, and that jangled her. And so she ended up not being as affable to Leanne as she ought to be, or as she normally would have been, because of situational overwhelm. Overwhelm is very often situational. It can definitely influence your story. It was there in our stories today, but the real long-range story power to affect people's heart is in the limiting self-beliefs. That's why these balance traits are always fascinating. So let's look at all of the balance traits that we have so far. Orderliness, self-control, moderation, and meekness. Collectively, they all share this importance of agency. If you give into the lost state, if our character gives into the lost state in a balance group, they lose agency. When they make the decision to remain in control, then they gain an agency. And collectively, the balanced traits collectively can lead to a very high degree of self-mastery. Okay. We're ready to do our formal review of the character profile tool. We have covered the character profile tool throughout several different lessons, and we've had the aspects kind of brought out one at a time as we were ready to approach them based on what we'd already learned about the character traits and how they operate. Now for this review, we're going to take a top-down approach so that you can really see how the tool fits together logically, how the components operate together. So this is the overview. It's going to take us about 3 lessons to cover it. The character profile tool, and first question is, why do we want a character profile tool? It's a great place to store the emotions of our characters so that even though we write in fragments of time, the emotional profile of the character will be consistent across our writing sessions. We have a character profile tool so that our reader will understand the motivations of our character, and our character will seem alive, and our reader will be able to relate to the character. And we do it so that we can understand the transformation that our character is going through from the start of our story to the end. We can have a guide to that transformation so that we can motivate it properly and our reader can find it inspirational. And we do all of this so that our character will seem alive, so that our character can show themselves without us telling. We don't have to say he was kind, he was generous, he was. We can demonstrate the behaviors, and so that the journey that we show our character on can inspire our readers. The character profile tool has a number of components. It's made up of 1 or more character profile diagrams, the memory prompt list, and the reference sheets. And another thing that it supports are the transitions. We'll have a start and an end diagram. We'll do presaging, and we'll have an aha moment. This is the overview. In today's lesson, we're going to just cover this first component, a review of the character profile diagram itself. These others we'll review in the coming 2 lessons. So here's a character profile diagram for George in his early 30s. You might remember it from our last lesson. We gave him a character profile diagram, which we represent on a file card. This is supposed to be a file card with just a starburst in the middle so that we can arrange the character traits around the starburst in the various positions. You'll recognize these right away as character traits. And what we're going to do next is do our formal review of the positions. I think that you will probably find that these are now so ingrained from all of these lessons that this should be something that is just like, yep, 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 yep. This should not be surprising to you at all. We're going to review these character traits by zone. The rudder traits are in the zone of awareness, the yellow. The zone of awareness is the place where the character is fully aware that they are making decisions that have to do with that character trait. The character probably can't name the trait, but he knows that he's making a choice. For example, If he carries his breakfast dishes over to the sink, he's looking at that and saying, oh, should I just toss them in the sink today, or should I rinse them properly? And that choice will, if it's orderliness, shall I take care of them properly in an orderly fashion, or should I skip it today? And that will be a choice that he's aware of if orderliness is in the rudder position. Another position area that you might find is the zone of stability, which we've got in blue, and that gives us the anchor traits. The anchor traits are rather firmly established for our character. If we're talking about orderliness in the breakfast dishes, he won't have to think much about it. He'll carry his dishes to the sink, rinse them properly, and deal with them properly, because it's an anchor trait. So it doesn't take his conscious mind to do it. He just does it. In this green area up here, the zone of chaos, these traits are basically the opposite of the anchor traits. The character doesn't think about them, but he doesn't pay attention to it either. He brings his dishes up and he just strews them on the counter and leaves and doesn't even think about it. Doesn't spend any time any more than was an anchor trait, but he doesn't take care of them either. It just doesn't occur to him to be orderly if orderliness is in the wing position. Then we have two more positions here. The purple, the bottom one, the zone of being. And the zone of being, we've always said, are character traits that are the base traits. They are so ingrained in our character that it's just totally second nature to the character. And if they didn't follow that trait, it would probably mean that something fundamental was going on in their lives, that they were crumbling. Whereas the zone of aspiration, the orange up here at the top, represent the pinnacle traits. And those traits are so out of reach for our character that he doesn't even dream of having that capability. And yet, we know in our stories of transformation that that aspirational trait will reach the point where our character has an opportunity to leap for it and get it. And then we're going to have this enormous joy because we knew that the trait was aspirational for our character and that this represents a great achievement. So this concludes part 1 of our formal review. And we have 2 more lessons where we're going to formally review the character traits. And then after that, I have a surprise for you. So stick around and see you next week. Bye-bye.